Thanks to Jeremy Diamond. Let's get more on the legal significance of this, the many legal questions. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Farkas, a retired U.S. Army military judge, he joins us now from New York. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
The ICC's answer to the criticism you're hearing now from, for instance, President Biden and from the Israeli leader is that it is not equating Israel with Hamas. It is, in effect, equating the victims here. It's accusing them of crimes under the same umbrella, but different crimes, in effect. It speaks of the October 7th terror attacks by Hamas as horrible, the raping, the murder, the killing, but accusing Israel of something different, in effect, targeting the Palestinian people, the residents of Gaza, for starvation. Do you agree with that distinction, with the ICC saying that they're not equating the two, but they are holding both sides responsible for the effect on their victims?
Right. Well, from a legal perspective, the law of war is a broad concept. Simply because you are charged or alleged to have committed war crimes or crimes against humanity doesn't mean it all falls under the same definition. It is a very broad umbrella. And it has as much to do with your conduct as an intentional violation of that law as it does about your response. So theoretically, at least, I'm not going to inject my personal opinions into the legal analysis. But as a legal matter, what you said is correct, Jim. The ICC, or more specifically, the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, who is requesting the warrant, judges still have to approve it. That could take weeks or months. But assuming they do, what the allegation will be is that Hamas perpetrated war crimes in their attacks, intentional attacks on civilians on October 7th. And in the response to those attacks, in the prosecution of its war against Hamas, Israel has crossed the line into illegal activity, war crimes, by, as the prosecutor says, intentionally directing its attacks upon civilians or targeting civilians and using starvation as a weapon.
Now, to your point here, and you're absolutely right, I'm interested in how the law relates to this. The prosecutors have said this does not relate to the causes of the war. In other words, saying they're not taking issue with Israel's right to defend itself or what sparked the war, the attacks on October 7th, but rather the conduct of the war since. And I wonder, in international law, is there precedent for holding a country such as Israel responsible for military action, and in this case, restrictions on movement in and out of Gaza that relate to humanitarian supplies, for holding a country responsible for the effects of that, how they carry out the war and how they restrict access to the war zone?
Well, there's certainly precedent over the course of hundreds of years and in the past century, in the last 60 or 70 years of international law jurisprudence. And let's just be a little more specific. The warrants that have been requested are for two leaders of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu and the defense minister, Yoav Gallant. They're not seeking an indictment on the country, right? So what the warrants and what the prosecutor claims is that the leadership, Netanyahu in particular, has directed attacks upon civilians. So, to use a common phrase, the ends do not justify the means. That's the basic concept behind the law of war, right? Israel certainly has a right to self-defense, as Mr. Khan, the prosecutor, I believe, stated in his statement. But all countries, whether they're party to the Geneva Conventions or not, are required to follow the customary and in many cases the written law of war in the prosecution of any armed military action. And Western countries with the Western ideology, democratic nations, follow the law of war. They prosecute their own when violations occur. And you've already heard a lot of that from Mr. Netanyahu even today.
Let me ask you this, and I don't mean to oversimplify here, but in legal terms, under international law, does intent matter, right? For these warrants to stand up, would Israel have to allegedly intend to inflict suffering on the Palestinian people, the residents of Gaza, rather than it be I hate to use the phrase collateral damage, but you understand what I'm saying here, rather than it be the result of military activity but not intentional?
Well, it seems that the warrants that have been requested do have an intentional element to them. I'll say that not every war crime or crime against humanity has intent as an element. You perhaps have heard the term proportionality. If the argument has been made that not just in Israel but throughout decades, if not hundreds of years of warfare, an enemy that locates itself among a civilian population, is going to bring civilian casualties or, as you say, collateral damage. So what is the proportionality that's permitted under the law of war when prosecuting a conflict in such a civilian-heavy area? That's a tough question. But without getting too far into it, it does seem that these particular warrants cite intentional conduct.
Well, it's quite a moment. We'll see if the panel approves those warrants in the weeks and months that they have to decide now. Michael Farkas, thanks so much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.